My racist daughter-in-law threw my Cherokee belongings in the yard yelling, "It's trash," while I buried my grandmother. She stole my money, destroyed sacred items, and told neighbors I was just a powerless old savage. Victoria never expected this worthless Cherokee widow to own the ranch deed, have territorial law on her side, and community witnesses to her crimes. One courthouse visit changed everything. Suddenly, the Eastern princess faced fraud charges and eviction papers. Her fake pregnancy lie crumbled. Her judge father lost his position. And my mongrel family reclaimed our dignity. She called me 47 times from prison. I never answered. Hit that subscribe button if you believe that respect is earned, not given. And that true strength comes from honoring both your roots and your resolve. This Cherokee ranch widow's journey will inspire you to never let anyone make you feel small again. I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped onto my porch that morning. The Texas dawn should have brought peace. But instead, the air felt heavy with the kind of trouble that changes everything. At 58, I'd learned to trust the whispers of my Cherokee blood when they warned of storms coming. The cattle were restless in the distance, their lowing more urgent than usual. Even the prairie grass seemed to bend away from the house, as if nature itself was trying to tell me to run. But Martha Two Rivers doesn't run not from trouble, not from anyone. I walked to my prayer circle. The sacred stones my husband Samuel had arranged for me 20 years ago when he promised I'd never have to choose between my two worlds. Kneeling in the center, I faced the rising sun and spoke the words my Cherokee grandmother had taught me before she passed into the spirit world just 3 days ago. "Grandmother," I whispered in Cherokee, my voice breaking with fresh grief. "Guide me through whatever darkness is coming. Your granddaughter feels lost without your wisdom." The morning wind carried my words away, but I swear I felt her presence in the rustling oak leaves above me. That's when I saw the dust cloud on the horizon, a rider approaching fast. My heart clenched as I recognized my son Thomas, his deputy sheriff's badge glinting in the early light. He only rode that hard when trouble was brewing. "Ma," he called out, reining in his lathered horse. "We need to talk. Victoria. She's made some decisions while you were gone for the burial." The way he said decisions made my blood run cold. "What kind of decisions, son?" Thomas couldn't meet my eyes. "She says the ranch needs changes, modern improvements. She's been talking to Judge Ashford about what's best for the family." Judge Ashford, Victoria's father, a man who'd made no secret of his belief that Cherokee blood was a stain to be washed clean. My hands trembled as I stood, dust from the prayer circle still clinging to my skirts. "Thomas, this ranch has been in our family for 20 years. Your father built every fence post with his own hands. My Cherokee mother blessed this land with sacred ceremonies. What changes could Victoria possibly? She says some of your belongings aren't suitable for a Christian home, especially with her condition." He swallowed hard. "She's expecting, Ma. The baby can't be raised around heathen influences." The words hit me like a physical blow. Heathen influences, my grandmother's medicine bundles, my mother's weaving, the sacred stones that connected me to generations of Cherokee women, all reduced to heathen influences by a daughter-in-law who'd never bothered to understand the heritage that flowed in her unborn child's veins. "Where is Victoria now?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "At the house. She's organizing things while you were away, making room for the nursery." Thomas finally looked at me, and I saw guilt and shame warring in his eyes. "Ma, please don't make this harder than it has to be. She's my wife now. Her happiness has to come first." I watched my eldest son ride away, carrying his wife's poison in his heart like a sickness. The morning sun climbed higher, but the shadows around my heart only grew darker. Something told me that when I returned to my own house, the house Samuel and I had built with love and sweat and dreams, I would find that Victoria's organizing meant something far more devastating than rearranging furniture. As I stood alone in my prayer circle, surrounded by the sacred stones that had witnessed 20 years of sunrise prayers, I made a vow to my Cherokee ancestors and to Samuel's Irish spirit, whatever Victoria had done to my home, whatever changes she'd made while I mourned my grandmother, she was about to learn that some women don't bend. We break others instead. The 3-day journey back from the Cherokee Nation should have brought me peace. I had sung the ancient songs over my grandmother's grave, felt her spirit rise with the smoke of sacred cedar, and received the blessing of the tribal elders who remembered when our people walked freely across this land. The weight of grief in my chest had transformed into something deeper, a connection to the generations of Cherokee women whose strength flowed in my veins. But as my horse crested the final hill before home, that peace shattered like glass hitting stone. My belongings were scattered across the ranch yard like the aftermath of a tornado. Sacred medicine bundles that had been passed down through 4 generations of Cherokee women lay torn open in the dirt, their contents spilling across the ground like spilled blood. My grandmother's ceremonial shawl, the one she'd worn to bless my marriage to Samuel, hung from the fence post like a discarded rag, its sacred symbols now stained with Texas dust. I sat frozen in my saddle, my horse sensing my distress and dancing nervously beneath me. 20 years of marriage memories lay trampled in the dirt. Samuel's letters from our courtship, our wedding photograph, the baby clothes I'd sewn for children who came too late or not at all. Everything that made this house a home had been ripped from its resting place and thrown away like refuse. Well, look who finally decided to come back from her savage gathering. Victoria stepped out of my house wearing a dress that cost more than most folks in town made in a month. Her blonde hair was perfectly arranged despite the Texas heat, and her smile held all the warmth of a winter rattlesnake. She placed one manicured hand on her still flat belly in a gesture I was learning to recognize as her favorite weapon. Victoria, I dismounted slowly, my legs trembling with rage I was fighting to contain. What have you done? I've done what needed doing, she replied, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. This place was a disgrace full of heathen trinkets and savage nonsense. No Christian child should be raised surrounded by such wickedness. She gestured dismissively at the scattered remains of my life. I've cleaned house, as any proper wife would do. I knelt beside my grandmother's medicine bundle, gathering the scattered herbs with shaking hands. Sweetgrass for purification, sage for wisdom, cedar for protection, all mixed now with the dirt of my own yard. These belonged to my grandmother. She was a healer, a woman of great wisdom and power. She was a heathen, Victoria spat, her mask of sweetness finally slipping. And so was your mother. Thank God Thomas has enough white blood to overcome the savage taint, though I do worry about what our children might inherit. The casual cruelty of her words hit me harder than any physical blow. I rose slowly, clutching the torn medicine bundle to my chest, and looked into the face of the woman my son had chosen over his own mother. Where is Thomas? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Working, like a proper man should. He agrees with me. You know, he said it was past time someone brought civilization to this place. Victoria's smile returned, triumphant and cold. He's the one who suggested I handle the cleaning while you were off dancing around fires with your savage relatives. The lie cut deep because I could almost believe it. Thomas had been pulling away from his Cherokee heritage since his marriage, ashamed of the part of himself that Victoria found distasteful. But to think he would sanction this destruction of everything his father had cherished. Mrs. Hayes, a familiar voice called from the road. Doc Morrison sat his horse at the edge of my property, his weathered face creased with concern. I was riding by and saw... Is everything all right here? Victoria's composure cracked slightly. She hadn't expected witnesses to her cruelty. Everything's fine, Doctor. Just doing some spring cleaning. Doc Morrison's eyes took in the scattered belongings, the sacred items trampled in the dirt, and my face, which I'm sure showed every bit of the devastation I felt. He'd been present when Samuel and I were married, had delivered my stillborn babies, had shared meals at our table where Cherokee and Irish traditions blended in harmony. Spring cleaning, he repeated slowly, his voice carrying the weight of judgment. I see. Yes. Well, Victoria smoothed her skirts nervously. Martha, I've prepared the small room off the kitchen for you. It's quite adequate for someone of your advancing years. You'll find it much more suitable than rattling around in that big house all alone. The small room off the kitchen. The room where we stored grain sacks and preserves. She was offering me a pantry to live in while she claimed the house my husband had built for me. I looked at Doc Morrison, saw the anger burning in his kind eyes, and felt something shift inside my chest. The grief and shock were transforming into something harder, something that had been forged in the sacred fires of my Cherokee ancestors and tempered by 20 years of frontier survival. How generous of you, Victoria, I said softly, my voice carrying a new edge that made her step back involuntarily. But I think there's been a misunderstanding about who exactly lives where. The wind picked up, scattering some of my papers across the yard, and I swear I felt my grandmother's spirit in that breeze, not peaceful now, but fierce with the righteous anger of a woman whose sacred legacy had been desecrated. Victoria had just made the worst mistake of her privileged Eastern life. She had declared war on a Cherokee woman on her own land. As I walked through the wreckage of my life, each step revealed new horrors that Victoria had inflicted while I honored my grandmother's passing. The full scope of her cruelty became clear as neighbors began gathering along the fence line, drawn by the spectacle of a Cherokee woman's sacred belongings scattered like garbage across her own land. My mother's loom, the one she'd used to weave the wedding blanket that had covered Samuel and me on our first night as husband and wife, lay broken in pieces near the water trough. The intricate patterns that told the story of our two peoples coming together in love had been deliberately destroyed. The wooden frame splintered as if someone had taken an axe to it with pure hatred. Lord have mercy, whispered Mrs. Patterson from the neighboring ranch, her hand pressed to her mouth in shock. Martha, what happened here? Before I could answer, Victoria's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. I told you, it's spring cleaning. All this old junk was cluttering up a Christian home. She gestured dismissively at the sacred Cherokee pottery my grandmother had made with her own hands, pottery that was now nothing but clay shards grinding into the Texas dirt. But it was what I found near the porch steps that made my blood run cold. My lockbox, the one Samuel had bought for me in San Antonio to keep our important papers safe, lay open and empty, its contents scattered to the wind. Marriage certificate, land deeds, Samuel's will, the bank documents that proved this ranch belonged to me, all gone. Victoria, I said, my voice carrying across the yard with deadly calm. Where are my papers? My legal documents? She shrugged with practiced innocence. Papers? Oh, you mean all those old yellow things? Most of them were illegible anyway. I'm sure Thomas has copies of anything important. Those papers proved this ranch is mine. Samuel left it to me in his will. Well, that's between you and Thomas now, isn't it? Victoria's smile was pure poison. A wife can't own property anyway. It's not natural. Judge Ashford explained the law to me. Everything belongs to the man of the house now. Doc Morrison dismounted and walked over to where I stood, his boots crunching on the broken pottery. He knelt and picked up a piece of my grandmother's sacred bowl, turning it over in his weathered hands. This was beautiful work, Martha. Cherokee pottery like this is worth a fortune to collectors back east. Was being the important word, Victoria said airily. All that savage nonsense had to go. I won't have my child exposed to heathen influences. Your child misses. Patterson looked confused. Victoria, you're barely showing. Surely you're not far enough along to. 3 months, Victoria announced proudly, her hand moving protectively to her belly. The doctor in Austin confirmed it. Thomas is so excited to finally have a legitimate heir. The word legitimate hung in the air like a curse. I had lost 3 babies in my 20 years with Samuel children who would have been Thomas's siblings. Children who died too soon to take their first breath. And now this woman was using her pregnancy as a weapon to justify destroying everything I held sacred. Mrs. Hayes, called out Jake Morrison, Doc's eldest son, from where he was examining something near the barn. You need to see this. I walked over on unsteady legs, dreading what new violation I would discover. Jake held up the remnants of my grandmother's medicine bag, the sacred bundle that contained herbs passed down through 7 generations of Cherokee healers. The leather had been cut open with a knife, and the precious contents had been mixed with horse manure and scattered in the mud. This wasn't cleaning, Jake said quietly, his young face tight with anger. This was deliberate destruction. Someone took time to ruin these things on purpose. Savage trinkets, Victoria called out, overhearing. Witchcraft and devil worship have no place in a Christian home. I did what any God-fearing woman would do. The gathered neighbors fell silent. These were frontier people who understood the value of respecting different ways, even if they didn't share them. They'd seen Cherokee healing save lives when white medicine failed. They'd watched my grandmother help deliver their children and cure their fevers with herbs that grew wild on the prairie. Martha, Doc Morrison said softly. Where's Thomas? Does he know about this? He's in town, Victoria answered before I could speak. He'll be back this evening. And yes, he knows. He's the one who suggested I take care of the cleaning while his mother was away playing with her savage relatives. The lie cut deep because it sounded like something Thomas might say now. After months of Victoria's poison dripping in his ear, my son, who had once been proud of his Cherokee blood, who had learned to track and hunt from my grandfather, who had spoken Cherokee as fluently as English until Victoria made him ashamed of his heritage. I knelt in the dirt and began gathering the scattered pieces of my life fragments of pottery, torn photographs, the few herbs that hadn't been completely destroyed. My hands shook as I worked, but my voice was steady when I finally spoke. Victoria, you have made a terrible mistake. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Have I? I don't think so. I think I've finally brought some civilization to this God-forsaken place. I stood slowly, my arms full of broken sacred things, and looked around at the neighbors who had witnessed this destruction. In their faces, I saw not judgment of me, but growing disgust for the woman who had committed such deliberate cruelty. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice carrying the authority of 7 generations of Cherokee women. This place is about to see some civilization, the kind that comes when justice finally arrives on the frontier. The wind picked up again, swirling the scattered papers and broken pottery around the yard like a dust devil. And in that wind, I swear I heard my grandmother's voice whispering the old Cherokee words for war. That evening, as the Texas sun painted the sky the color of dried blood, I rode to the sacred grove where my Uncle Running Bear waited. The ancient oak trees stood like sentinels in the gathering darkness, their branches reaching toward the stars that had guided our people for countless generations. Running Bear sat cross-legged beside a small fire, his weathered face carved from the same stone as the mountains where our ancestors once walked free. At 72, he carried the wisdom of the old ways, the stories that white schools tried to beat out of Cherokee children, the healing songs that Victoria would call savage nonsense. Niece, he said in Cherokee, not looking up as I approached. Your grandmother's spirit is restless. She has seen the desecration of her sacred things. I dismounted and sat across from him, the fire crackling between us like the heartbeat of our people. Uncle, I don't know what to do. Victoria has destroyed everything grandmother's medicine bundles, mother's loom, the pottery that held 4 generations of our family's prayers. The white woman seeks to erase you, he said. finally meeting my eyes. She fears the power in your Cherokee blood, the strength that comes from walking in two worlds. But she has made a mistake. Niece. She has awakened the warrior spirit that sleeps in all Cherokee women. He reached into his medicine bag and withdrew a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. Your grandmother came to me in a vision 3 nights ago. She said you would need this. He unwrapped the bundle, revealing a piece of sacred white stone carved with ancient Cherokee symbols. This belonged to your great-great-grandmother, the one who survived the Trail of Tears. She carried it from the old country to this new land, and it holds the power of all the Cherokee women who refuse to be broken. I took the stone with trembling hands, feeling its warmth pulse against my palm. What do I do with it, Uncle? You remember who you are, he said firmly. You are Martha Two Rivers, daughter of Cherokee healers and Irish fighters. Your blood carries the wisdom of the mountains and the stubbornness of the prairie. No Eastern woman with her fancy dresses and poisoned words can destroy what the Creator has made strong. The fire popped, sending sparks into the darkening sky, and Running Bear leaned forward. But the Cherokee way is not just about spiritual strength. Niece, we survive because we are wise as well as strong. Tell me about the white man's law. What weapons does she use against you? I explained about the missing papers, Victoria's claims about property law, Judge Ashford's influence. Running Bear listened without interruption, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. The white man's law can be turned against itself, he said thoughtfully. In the old days, when soldiers came to steal our land, some of our people learned their laws and used them as weapons. You must do the same. How Victoria destroyed my papers? She says everything belongs to Thomas now. Running Bear smiled, and for a moment I saw the young warrior he had once been. The white man loves his papers, but he loves his witnesses more. How many neighbors saw the destruction today? At least 6 families. And this Dr. Morrison, he is a man of honor. Yes. He delivered my babies. Tended Samuel when he was dying. He knows our family story. Then you have weapons the Eastern woman doesn't know about. He stood and walked to a larger oak tree, placing his hand on its ancient bark. This tree was here when your grandmother was born. It will be here when Victoria's bones are dust. Some things cannot be destroyed. Niece, no matter how much hatred drives the destroyer. I joined him at the tree, feeling its solid strength beneath my palm. What should I do first? Tomorrow, you visit the white man's lawkeeper in town, not the corrupt judge, but the younger one who keeps the written records. You gather your witnesses. You make Victoria's cruelty known to all who will listen. His voice grew hard as winter stone. And then you show her that Cherokee women do not yield their sacred ground to anyone. As if summoned by his words, an owl called from the darkness the messenger of Cherokee spirits. Running Bear nodded with satisfaction. Your grandmother approves of the plan, he said. The white woman thinks she has won because she destroyed sacred things. But she doesn't understand that the real power lives in here. He touched his chest. And here. He touched his head. Destroy the objects, and the spirit only grows stronger. I clutched the sacred stone tighter, feeling my ancestors' strength flowing through it into my bones. Victoria had awakened something she couldn't understand or control. The Cherokee warrior woman was rising. The next morning, I rode into town with my grandmother's sacred stone tucked safely in my dress pocket, its warmth giving me courage as I approached the territorial courthouse. The building stood like a fortress of white man's justice, its wooden walls weathered by Texas sun and frontier storms. Inside, I found Clerk Henderson hunched over his ledger books, his wire-rimmed spectacles perched on his nose as he carefully recorded the legal business of our growing territory. Unlike Judge Ashford, Henderson was a fair man who'd immigrated from Pennsylvania with nothing but honest intentions and a respect for the law. Mrs. Hayes, he said, looking up with genuine concern. I heard about the troubles at your ranch. Terrible business. Destroying a person's belongings like that. Mr. Henderson, I need to know about property law. My daughter-in-law claims that since Samuel died, everything belongs to my son Thomas now. Is that true? Henderson set down his pen and pulled out a thick leather-bound book. Let's see what the territorial statutes say about that. He flipped through pages covered in dense legal text. Here we are. Property rights for widows in Texas territory. He adjusted his spectacles and read carefully. According to territorial law, Mrs. Hayes, a widow retains full ownership of any property that was specifically deeded to her name, regardless of her deceased husband's will. Do you have the original deed to your ranch? My heart sank. Victoria destroyed it, along with all my other papers. She scattered them to the wind while I was away. Henderson frowned deeply. That's destruction of legal documents, which is a serious crime in territorial court. But don't worry, I keep copies of all property deeds filed in this county. He walked to a large filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. Here it is, deed filed in 1863 for the Two Rivers Ranch, 640 acres, purchased by Samuel Hayes and Martha Two Rivers Hayes as joint owners with right of survivorship. Relief flooded through me like cool water. What does that mean exactly? It means when your husband died, the entire property automatically became yours. Your son has no legal claim to it whatsoever. Henderson's voice grew stern. And if someone has been representing themselves as the owner, that constitutes fraud. Victoria told the neighbors that Judge Ashford explained the law to her. She said everything belongs to the man of the house now. Henderson's face darkened. Judge Ashford has no jurisdiction over property deeds filed in territorial court, and he certainly has no right to give legal advice about property that doesn't concern his circuit. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Between you and me, Mrs. Hayes, there have been complaints about Judge Ashford. Some say he's been advising certain families on how to acquire property through questionable means. The pieces began falling into place. Victoria's father is Judge Ashford. She's his daughter. I see. Henderson made a note in his ledger. That explains a great deal. Mrs. Hayes, I need to ask you directly, have you given your son or his wife permission to make decisions about your property? Never. I didn't even know they were planning to destroy my belongings. Then, what happened at your ranch constitutes several crimes under territorial law: destruction of property, theft, fraud, and possibly conspiracy if Judge Ashford was involved in advising them. Henderson pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I'm going to file a formal complaint with the territorial marshal. This kind of behavior cannot be tolerated in a civilized territory. I felt the sacred stone pulse warm against my chest. What can I do to protect myself? First, I'll prepare certified copies of your deed and all relevant documents. Second, you should gather witness statements from everyone who saw the destruction. Third, you need to formally notify your son and his wife that they are trespassing on your property. Trespassing, but Thomas is my son. Henderson's expression was kind but firm. Mrs. Hayes, family relationships don't override property law. If they're living on your land without your permission and destroying your belongings, they're trespassers. You have the right to evict them. The word hit me like a physical blow. Evict my own son. But then I thought of my grandmother's sacred medicine bundles mixed with horse manure, my mother's loom destroyed with deliberate hatred, and I felt my Cherokee warrior spirit rise. How long would an eviction take? With the evidence you have and the witness statements, probably 30 days. Judge Morrison from the next county would handle it, since Judge Ashford has a clear conflict of interest. I stood up, clutching the certified copies of my deed. Mr. Henderson, please prepare the eviction papers. Are you certain, Mrs. Hayes? This will cause quite a stir in the community. I thought of Running Bear's words about Cherokee women who refuse to be broken. I'm certain. Victoria wanted to play by white man's law. Now she'll learn that law protects Cherokee women too. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt my ancestors' approval in the warm Texas wind. The legal battle was just beginning, but I now had weapons Victoria never expected. The law was on my side. That afternoon, my kitchen became a war council. Sarah arrived first, her schoolteacher's dress dusty from the hard ride from town. My daughter's face was tight with controlled fury as she surveyed the damage Victoria had left in her wake. "Mama, I can't believe Thomas let this happen," she said, carefully placing the fragments of our grandmother's sacred bowl on the kitchen table. When I heard what Victoria did to grandmother's medicine bundles, I wanted to ride straight over here and give that woman a piece of my mind. "Your brother is lost right now," I replied, spreading the legal documents Henderson had given me across the table. "Victoria has poisoned his mind against his own heritage, but the law is clear this ranch belongs to me, and what she did was criminal." James thundered into the yard just as the sun reached its peak, his horse lathered from a desperate ride from the neighboring county where he'd been working cattle. My youngest son burst through the kitchen door like a storm, his eyes blazing with the same Cherokee fire that had sustained our people through generations of struggle. "Mama, I came as soon as I got Sarah's message." He pulled me into a fierce embrace. "That Eastern witch destroyed grandmother's things, the sacred items that have been in our family for 7 generations. She did more than that, son." I showed him the legal papers. "She's been claiming this ranch belongs to Thomas, telling people I have no rights to my own property. But, Mr. Henderson found the original deed. Everything is still in my name." Doc Morrison arrived as we were laying out our evidence, his weathered face grim with purpose. "Martha, I've been talking to the neighbors. Every family within 5 miles is willing to testify about what they saw yesterday. Victoria's cruelty has turned the whole community against her." "That's good," Sarah said, her teacher's mind organizing our strategy. "But we need more than witness statements. We need to prove she acted with malicious intent, not just ignorance." Running Bear appeared in the doorway like a spirit materializing from the prairie wind. He carried a parfleche bag decorated with ancient Cherokee symbols, and his presence filled the kitchen with the weight of ancestral wisdom. "Niece," he said in Cherokee, "I have brought something that will help in your fight." He opened the bag and withdrew several items wrapped in sacred cloth. "Your grandmother's sister lives with the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. When she heard what happened, she sent these." He unwrapped the bundle to reveal duplicate medicine bundles, identical to the ones Victoria had destroyed. "Your grandmother made 2 sets of everything, one for you, and one for her sister to keep safe. The sacred power cannot be destroyed by ignorant hands." Tears streamed down my face as I touched the familiar herbs, the blessed stones, the medicine tools that connected me to generations of Cherokee healers. She knew this might happen. Cherokee women have always known that our sacred things would be threatened by those who fear our power. Running Bear replied, "Your grandmother prepared for this day long ago." James picked up one of the legal documents, his jaw tight with anger. "So Victoria destroyed our heritage for nothing. The sacred items still exist, and Mama still owns the ranch." "Not for nothing," I corrected. "She revealed her true nature to the entire community. She showed everyone exactly who she is." Doc Morrison nodded grimly. "The neighbors are talking, Martha. Word is spreading about what kind of woman Thomas married. Some folks are saying he's been bewitched by Eastern poison." We spent the next hour planning our confrontation strategy. Sarah would document everything in her precise teacher's handwriting. James would ensure Victoria couldn't claim we threatened her. Doc Morrison would serve as an impartial witness. Running Bear would provide the spiritual strength our family needed. "When do we face them?" James asked, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. "Tomorrow evening, when Thomas returns from his deputy rounds." I decided. This ends in my own parlor, on my own land, with my family and the truth as witnesses. Just as we finished our planning, the sound of hoofbeats echoed across the yard. Through the kitchen window, I saw Thomas riding up the trail, his face dark with trouble. Behind him rode Victoria, her pale dress a stark contrast against the Texas landscape. "They're here," Sarah whispered urgently. "They're coming now." I felt the sacred stone pulse warm against my chest and saw my grandmother's spirit reflected in Running Bear's knowing eyes. The confrontation we'd planned for tomorrow was happening today. "Good," I said, standing tall with the strength of 7 generations of Cherokee women flowing through my veins. "Let them come. It's time my son learned the truth about the woman he married." The war council was over. The battle for my family's soul was about to begin. Thomas dismounted slowly, his deputy's badge catching the afternoon light as he approached the kitchen door. I could see the confusion in his eyes as he took in the gathering his siblings. Doc Morrison and Running Bear all assembled like a tribunal waiting for judgment. "Ma, what's all this about?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "Victoria said you've been acting strange since you got back from the burial." "Come inside, son," I said with the calm authority of a Cherokee matriarch. "We need to have a family meeting. A formal one." Victoria swept into my kitchen like she owned it, her pale blue dress pristine despite the dusty ride. She surveyed our gathered allies with the disdain of someone who considered herself superior to frontier folk and savages alike. "Really, Martha," she said with false sweetness. "All this drama is unnecessary. I've already explained everything to Thomas. The cleaning was for the good of the family." "Sit down, Victoria," I commanded, my voice carrying the weight of 7 generations of Cherokee women who had faced down soldiers, settlers, and anyone else who threatened their families. "You too, Thomas. This concerns both of you." I moved to the head of my own kitchen table. The legal documents spread before me like weapons of war. Sarah sat at my right hand, her teacher's composure masking the fury beneath. James flanked my left, his hand resting on his knife hilt. Doc Morrison positioned himself as the impartial witness, while Running Bear stood behind me like the spirit of our ancestors made manifest. "Thomas," I began formally, 3 days ago, while I was honoring your great-grandmother's passing with sacred Cherokee ceremonies, your wife destroyed property belonging to 7 generations of our family. She scattered my legal documents, destroyed sacred medicine bundles, and broke pottery that held the prayers of our people." Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Thomas, your mother is being dramatic again. I simply cleaned out some old junk that was cluttering our home." "Our home," I repeated, my voice deadly quiet. "Thomas, do you believe this ranch belongs to your wife?" My son shifted uncomfortably. "Well, Ma, when a man marries, his wife becomes part of the family property decisions. Victoria was just trying to make space for the baby." I placed the certified deed on the table with deliberate ceremony. "This is the original property deed for the Two Rivers Ranch, filed in territorial court in 1863. Read it aloud." "Son." Thomas picked up the document with trembling hands. His voice cracked as he read, "Property purchased by Samuel Hayes and Martha Two Rivers Hayes as joint owners with right of survivorship." He looked up, his face pale. "Ma, I thought—" Victoria said. "Victoria lied," Sarah said coldly. "Just like she lied about having the right to destroy our grandmother's sacred things." Running Bear stepped forward, his presence filling the room with ancient power. "Thomas Hayes," he said in English, his accent thick with Cherokee dignity. "Your great-grandmother was a medicine woman who survived the Trail of Tears. Her sacred bundles carried the healing power of our people across 1,000 miles of death and sorrow. Your wife mixed those sacred herbs with horse manure and scattered them in the dirt like garbage." Victoria's mask of sweetness finally cracked. "Those weren't sacred anything, they were just old weeds and superstitious nonsense. No Christian child should be exposed to heathen witchcraft." The word heathen hung in the air like a curse. I saw Thomas flinch as if he'd been slapped, and something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of the boy who had once been proud of his Cherokee blood. "Thomas," I said gently, "your father married me knowing I walked in 2 worlds. He never asked me to choose between them. He built me a prayer circle, learned Cherokee healing songs, and honored our traditions alongside his own Irish faith. I touched the sacred stone in my pocket. "What does your wife ask of you?" Before Thomas could answer, Victoria stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "I ask him to be civilized, to raise our children as Christians, not savages, to be ashamed of the primitive blood that runs in his veins." The silence that followed was deafening. Doc Morrison's face showed his disgust. Sarah's eyes blazed with Cherokee fire. James's hand tightened on his knife. But it was Thomas's expression that mattered most, the slow dawning of understanding as he finally saw his wife's true nature. "Victoria," he said slowly, "you told me my mother had given you permission to clean out her things." "I told you what you needed to hear?" she snapped, her Eastern arrogance finally showing its full colors. "Someone had to bring civilization to this godforsaken place." I stood up, my full height commanding the room. "Thomas, your wife has committed crimes under territorial law, destruction of property, theft, fraud. The territorial marshal will be here tomorrow with eviction papers." Victoria's face went white. "Eviction? You can't evict us. Thomas owns this place." "No," I said with quiet finality. "He doesn't. And neither do you." The battle lines were drawn. The truth was finally in the light. Victoria's composure shattered like thin ice under a horse's hoof. "You can't do this to me. I'm carrying Thomas's child. I'm a respectable woman from a good Eastern family." "Are you?" I asked, pulling out another document Henderson had provided. "Because, according to the bank records, someone has been forging my signature on withdrawal slips. Someone took nearly $300 from my account while I was mourning my grandmother." Thomas's head snapped up. $300, Ma. I never authorized. I did what was necessary," Victoria shrieked, her Eastern refinement completely gone. "This place was falling apart. It needed proper furniture, decent clothing, civilized improvements. I won't live like some frontier savage." The word savage hit the room like a thunderclap. Running Bear's eyes flashed with ancient fire. Sarah stood up slowly, her teacher's composure replaced by Cherokee warrior fury. Even Doc Morrison recoiled from the naked hatred in Victoria's voice. "There it is," I said quietly. "The truth finally comes out. Thomas, do you hear how your wife speaks about your heritage, about the blood that flows in your children's veins?" Thomas stared at Victoria as if seeing her for the first time. You really believe that about my Cherokee blood?" "It's not your fault," Victoria said desperately, trying to salvage the situation. "You can't help what your mother is. But our children don't have to carry that burden. We can raise them properly, as Christians, without any savage influences." "Stop." Thomas's voice cut through her words like a blade. "Just stop talking." I reached into my apron and withdrew the items Running Bear had brought my grandmother's duplicate medicine bundles. Perfect replicas of what Victoria had destroyed. "These belong to your great-great-grandmother, Thomas. The woman who walked the trail of tears and survived. The woman whose healing knowledge saved dozens of lives, including white settlers who had nowhere else to turn." Victoria's eyes widened in horror. "Those should have been destroyed with the others. How did you?" "Cherokee women prepare for people like you," Running Bear said with quiet dignity. "We have survived soldiers, settlers, and government agents who tried to erase us. Did you think one ignorant Eastern woman could succeed where the United States Army failed?" The truth was spreading across Thomas's face like sunrise after a long night. "Victoria, you told me Ma had given you permission to clean out her things. You said she was getting senile, that she needed help making decisions." "I told you what you needed to hear," Victoria snapped, her desperation making her reckless. "Your mother was filling your head with heathen nonsense, making you ashamed of being a proper white man. Someone had to save you from her influence." "Save me." Thomas stood up, his deputy's badge catching the light. "Ma raised me to be proud of both sides of my heritage. She taught me Cherokee tracking skills that make me the best tracker in the county. She taught me healing arts that have saved lives. And you wanted me to be ashamed of all that. Yes, Victoria screamed, finally showing her true colors. I wanted you to be a civilized white man, not some half-breed savage playing at being respectable. The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas looked at his wife, really looked at her, and I saw 26 years of my son's life reshaping itself in his mind. The woman he'd married, the mother of his unborn child, had just revealed herself as everything our Cherokee ancestors had fought against. "Get out," he said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my mother's house. Get out now." Victoria's face cycled through shock, rage, and finally desperate calculation. "Thomas, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. What about our baby? What about our future?" "Our future," Thomas looked at me, then at his siblings, then at the sacred items Victoria had tried to destroy. "Victoria, I just realized something. Any future built on hatred for half of who I am isn't a future worth having." Victoria's final mask fell away, revealing the ugly prejudice beneath. "You'll regret this, Thomas Hayes. My father won't let some half-breed savage and her mongrel children steal what's rightfully mine. We'll see who really has power in this territory." But as she stormed toward the door, I smiled. Because Victoria had just made her biggest mistake yet. She had threatened my family in front of witnesses. And in Texas territory, that was a declaration of war. The next morning brought Territorial Marshal Williams to my door, his badge gleaming in the Texas sun and legal papers tucked securely in his saddlebags. Word of Victoria's threats had spread through the frontier community faster than wildfire, and the Marshal's presence meant territorial law was finally taking notice. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, tipping his hat respectfully. "I've got eviction papers here, signed by Judge Morrison from the next county. Also got warrants for fraud and destruction of property." His weathered face was grim. "Ma'am, I've been marshalling in this territory for 15 years, and I've never seen such deliberate cruelty toward a widow woman." Thomas emerged from the barn where he'd spent the night. His deputy's uniform wrinkled, but his eyes clear for the first time in months. "Marshal Williams, I want to make a statement. My wife committed those crimes without my knowledge or consent. I stand with my mother." The marshal nodded approvingly. "Good to hear, Deputy Hayes. Your mother's got the whole community behind her. Doc Morrison's been collecting witness statements all morning." As if summoned by his name, Doc Morrison rode up with a leather portfolio bulging with documents. "Martha, I've got statements from 12 families who witnessed the destruction. Mrs. Patterson even sketched pictures of the scattered belongings." He handed me the portfolio with satisfaction. "Victoria Ashford made a lot of enemies yesterday. Where is she now?" I asked. "Holed up at the hotel with her father," the marshal replied. "Judge Ashford's been making noise about territorial jurisdiction and family rights, but his authority don't extend to property crimes. Judge Morrison's already ruled you get your house back, and Victoria faces criminal charges." Sarah and James arrived with a wagon full of supplies, their faces bright with purpose. "Mama," Sarah called out, "we're here to help you reclaim your home properly." James brought lumber to repair what Victoria broke, and I brought new fabric to replace what she destroyed. But the most meaningful arrival came last. Running Bear appeared leading a small procession of Cherokee families from the reservation, their horses carrying bundles wrapped in sacred cloth. "Niece," he said in Cherokee, "your grandmother's sisters have sent gifts to replace what was lost. The Cherokee Nation honors your courage in defending our sacred ways." I unwrapped the bundles with trembling hands, finding perfect replicas of everything Victoria had destroyed: pottery blessed by Cherokee prayers, medicine bundles prepared by tribal healers, weaving tools carved by master craftsmen. The spiritual power that Victoria had tried to erase was not only restored, but strengthened by the love of my people. Thomas approached hesitantly, his hat in his hands. "Ma, Can you forgive me? I let that woman poison my mind against my own heritage, against everything you taught me about walking in two worlds? I took my son's face in my hands, seeing the boy who had once been proud of his Cherokee blood. Thomas, forgiveness isn't something you earn, it's something you accept. Your father would be proud to see you choosing family over fear. Marshall Williams cleared his throat. Mrs. Hayes, there's one more matter. Victoria's making wild claims about pregnancy, saying you can't evict an expectant mother. You got any thoughts on that? I exchanged glances with Running Bear, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Cherokee women had ways of knowing things that white doctors might miss. Marshall, I suggest you have the territorial doctor examine Victoria's claims. Sometimes desperate people make desperate lies. The Marshal's eyes sharpened with understanding. I'll do just that, ma'am. If she's been lying about pregnancy on top of everything else, that's fraud of the worst kind. As the day progressed, my home was restored not just to its former state, but to something better. The Cherokee families worked alongside my frontier neighbors, creating a bridge between cultures that Victoria's hatred had tried to burn. Thomas worked harder than anyone, as if physical labor could somehow repair the damage his betrayal had caused. By sunset, the Two Rivers Ranch was whole again, not just the buildings and belongings, but the spirit of the place. The sacred items were returned to their honored positions, the legal documents were safely filed, and my family was united in truth rather than divided by lies. Victoria's war against our Cherokee heritage had failed completely. Justice had come to the frontier, and it spoke with the voice of 7 generations of Cherokee women who refused to be erased. 3 days later, Doc Morrison arrived with news that changed everything. His weathered face carried a mixture of disgust and satisfaction as he dismounted at my porch. Martha, the territorial doctor examined Victoria yesterday. There's no pregnancy. Never was. She's been lying about everything from the beginning. The revelation hit like lightning across the prairie. Thomas, who had been mending fence posts as part of his penance, dropped his hammer and sank onto the porch steps. No baby, but she showed me. She said the doctor in Austin. Fraud, son, Doc Morrison said gently. Complete fraud. Marshall Williams is filing additional charges today. Victoria Ashford is looking at serious prison time. That evening, as the Texas sky painted itself in shades of gold and crimson, Running Bear requested permission to hold a healing ceremony on my land. The sacred ground has been violated, he explained to the gathered crowd of neighbors. Cherokee tradition requires cleansing before the spirits can rest in peace. What happened next was something I had never seen in 20 years on the frontier. White families stood respectfully alongside Cherokee elders as Running Bear blessed my property with sacred smoke and ancient songs. Mrs. Patterson held her children close. Not in fear, but in reverence for traditions older than their Texas settlement. Great Spirit, Running Bear chanted in Cherokee, his voice carrying across the prairie wind. This land has seen hatred, but love is stronger. This ground has known lies, but truth endures. Bless this family that walks in two worlds with wisdom from both. Thomas approached the sacred circle hesitantly. Uncle Running Bear, he said, using the Cherokee term of respect. May I, can I participate? I want to honor my heritage properly. The old Cherokee elder smiled, his weathered face creasing with approval. Thomas Hayes, son of Martha Two Rivers, you are welcome in the sacred circle. Your Cherokee blood has never been a shame, only a gift you forgot how to unwrap. As Thomas knelt beside me in the prayer circle, I felt my grandmother's spirit in the evening breeze. The sacred items Victoria had tried to destroy were not only restored, but blessed by the presence of two communities united in respect rather than divided by fear. Doc Morrison stepped forward when the ceremony concluded. Martha, I want to say something to everyone here. I've lived on this frontier for 30 years, and I've seen what happens when fear and prejudice take root. But I've also seen what happens when good people stand together against hatred. He looked around at the gathered faces. What Victoria Ashford did to this family was evil, But what this community did in response, that's what makes us civilized. The crowd murmured agreement. Jake Morrison, Doc's son, spoke up. Mrs. Hayes. My PA taught me that a person's worth isn't measured by their bloodline, but by their character. You've shown more character in this fight than most folks show in a lifetime. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. Mama, look around. Victoria tried to destroy our family's heritage, but instead she brought two communities together, Cherokee and white families, standing side by side, honoring each other's ways. James nodded toward the sacred circle where Cherokee and frontier children were playing together. She wanted to erase our Cherokee blood, but now these white kids are learning Cherokee games and songs. Her hatred backfired completely. As the evening deepened and families began heading home, Thomas lingered by the sacred fire. Ma, I need to ask you something. When Victoria showed her true colors, why didn't you turn away from me? I chose her over you. I let her poison my mind against everything you taught me. I placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling the strength that came from both his Cherokee and Irish heritage. Thomas, a mother's love doesn't have conditions. You were lost, but you found your way home. That's what matters. Running Bear approached us, carrying a small bundle wrapped in sacred cloth. Martha Two Rivers, the Cherokee Nation has voted. You will be honored at the next tribal gathering as a woman who defended our sacred ways against those who would destroy them. Your courage has made the Cherokee people proud. As I accepted the honor bundle, I felt the presence of 7 generations of Cherokee women who had fought similar battles and won similar victories. Victoria's war against our heritage had not only failed, it had strengthened the very traditions she tried to erase. The frontier had learned an important lesson: Cherokee wisdom and white civilization could walk the same path in peace. 2 weeks later, my kitchen table groaned under the weight of a feast that celebrated more than just family, it celebrated the healing of a community. Thomas had worked tirelessly to repair every piece of damage Victoria's hatred had caused, and now my home felt more whole than it had in years. Pass the cornbread. Ma, James said with a grin, reaching across the table where Cherokee Three Sisters vegetables sat alongside Irish stew. I swear, having the family together again makes everything taste better. Sarah nodded, her school teacher's mind already planning. Mama, I've been thinking. The children in town have been asking about Cherokee traditions ever since the healing ceremony. Would you be willing to teach them some of our grandmother's stories? The request warmed my heart like summer sunshine. Of course. Daughter, your great-grandmother's stories deserve to live on, especially now that we know how precious they are. Thomas looked up from his plate, his eyes clear and peaceful for the first time since his marriage. Ma, I want to learn them too. All of them. I realize I let Victoria's shame poison me against half of who I am. I don't want to lose any more of our heritage. Doc Morrison arrived just as we were clearing dishes, his weathered face bright with news. Martha, thought you'd want to know Victoria was sentenced this morning. 2 years in the territorial prison for fraud, plus restitution for everything she destroyed. Judge Morrison said it was one of the clearest cases of malicious destruction he'd ever seen. And Judge Ashford, I asked, stripped of his circuit position pending investigation into his other legal advice. Turns out Victoria wasn't the first person he helped with questionable property claims. Doc Morrison accepted a cup of coffee gratefully. The territorial governor is sending a new judge, one who believes in actual law instead of family favoritism. A running bear appeared in the doorway like a spirit materializing from the prairie wind. Martha Two Rivers, I bring greetings from the Cherokee Nation Council. They have voted to establish a trading post on your land. If you are willing, a place where Cherokee and white families can meet in peace, sharing goods and wisdom. The proposal took my breath away. A trading post here. The council believes your ranch has become sacred ground, a place where 2 worlds learn to walk together in harmony. They want to honor that by making it a permanent bridge between our peoples. Thomas stood up, his deputy's badge catching the lamplight. Uncle Running Bear, I'd like to help with that trading post. I want to use my position to make sure Cherokee families are treated fairly in all their dealings with territorial law. The old Cherokee elder smiled with deep satisfaction. Thomas Hayes, your grandmother's spirit rejoices to see you reclaim your heritage with pride instead of shame. As the evening progressed, neighbors began arriving for what had become a weekly gathering. The Patterson children sat cross-legged on my floor, listening with wide eyes as I told Cherokee creation stories. Mrs. Patterson herself was learning to weave baskets using Cherokee techniques, her clumsy fingers gradually finding the rhythm of ancient patterns. Mrs. Hayes, young Jake Morrison said, looking up from the Cherokee game Running Bear was teaching him. My PA says you're the bravest woman in Texas territory. Is that true? I laughed, ruffling his sandy hair. Jake, bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are scared. And I had plenty of help from brave people like your father. Sarah leaned over and whispered, Mama, look around. Victoria tried to destroy our Cherokee heritage, but now half the county is learning Cherokee ways. Her hatred created more understanding than years of peaceful coexistence ever did. She was right. Children who had never heard Cherokee words were now learning counting songs in my grandmother's language. White families who had once viewed Cherokee traditions with suspicion were now asking to participate in our ceremonies. Victoria's war against our culture had backfired so completely that Cherokee wisdom was spreading further than ever before. As families began heading home under the star-filled Texas sky, Thomas lingered to help with the dishes. Ma, do you think Pa would be proud of how this all turned out? I thought of Samuel, my Irish husband who had built me a Cherokee prayer circle and learned to honor both worlds. Son, your father always said that love multiplies when you share it, but hatred divides everything it touches. Victoria chose division, but we chose multiplication. Yes, he'd be very proud. The Two Rivers Ranch had become exactly what its name suggested, a place where different streams of heritage flowed together, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either could achieve alone. 6 months later, I stood on my porch watching the sun set over the Two Rivers Ranch, painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson that reminded me of the sacred fires of my Cherokee ancestors. The trading post Running Bear had proposed was now a thriving reality, with Cherokee families and white settlers meeting weekly to exchange goods, stories, and wisdom. Thomas rode up the trail, his deputy's badge gleaming in the dying light, but his face carried a peace I hadn't seen since before his marriage to Victoria. Ma, the territorial governor wants to make our trading post an official cultural center. He says what we've built here could be a model for the whole frontier. I smiled, fingering the sacred stone in my pocket that had given me strength during the darkest days. Your great-grandmother would be proud, son. She always said that Cherokee wisdom grows stronger when it's shared, not hidden. Sarah emerged from the schoolhouse we'd built near the trading post, her arms full of children's drawings depicting Cherokee and white families working together. Mama, look what the children drew today. They can't imagine a world where people hate each other for their heritage. To them, having Cherokee and Irish blood is just normal. That was perhaps the greatest victory of all. The next generation was growing up seeing cultural diversity as strength, not division. Victoria's hatred had been so thoroughly defeated that children couldn't even understand the prejudice that had once threatened to tear our family apart. James arrived with Running Bear, both men dusty from working on the new barn that would house our expanded cultural center. Aunt Martha, Running Bear said in Cherokee, the tribal council has decided. Your ranch will be remembered in Cherokee oral tradition as the place where two rivers of heritage learned to flow as one. And as the evening deepened, families began gathering for our weekly storytelling circle. Cherokee elders sat beside white grandparents, all listening as I told the story of how hatred had tried to destroy our heritage, but had instead made it stronger. The children listened with wide eyes, learning that courage wasn't about never being afraid, it was about standing up for what's right even when your knees are shaking. Mrs. Hayes, asked little Mary Patterson. Will you tell us again about how you defeated the mean lady who tried to steal your Cherokee things? I laughed, pulling the child onto my lap. Mary, I didn't defeat Victoria with anger or revenge. I defeated her with truth, with family love, and with the wisdom of 7 generations of Cherokee women who taught me that dignity can never be stolen, only given away. Doc Morrison nodded approvingly from his place in the circle. And that, children, is why we call this the Two Rivers Ranch? Because Mrs. Hayes showed us that when different streams come together with respect instead of fear, they create something more beautiful than either could be alone. As the stars emerged in the vast Texas sky, I felt my grandmother's presence in the prairie wind. The sacred items Victoria had tried to destroy were now honored by 2 communities. The Cherokee heritage she had called savage was now celebrated as wisdom. The family she had tried to divide was now stronger than ever. I had learned the most important lesson of my 60 years: when you stand on the solid ground of your own dignity, no storm can wash you away. The Two Rivers Ranch would flow on forever, carrying the wisdom of 2 peoples united in respect, love, and the unshakable truth that heritage shared is heritage multiplied.